Hey lovelies, it's MLP with Lovely Lulu Designs, and this is the second video of the two-part ice lid topper and vodka strawberry lemonade zipper split tutorial. I apologize for the delay in releasing this, but my children have only just returned to in-person learning for the first time since April, so it's been hard to find time to record. In this video, I will show you how to make a zipper split tumbler. The zipper technique is the same for any material you choose, such as fabric, cardstock, or tissue paper, but in this video I did marble and glitter zipper split. As always, I will link the materials I used to create these tumblers in the description section of this video. I also wanted to thank everyone who has joined me in my new Facebook group, Lovely Creations. I love seeing all of your designs and have loved seeing the support and help you're providing each other in our small community. If you're interested in joining, you can get exclusive group discount codes for my website where I sell my digital designs. I am still working hard at designing and have released some new designs for your businesses, such as care instructions for your tumbler boxes, which complement the circle care instruction labels you can use for either the bottom of your tumblers or to seal your boxes. I have two versions of each design, one where you can add your own logo or one which says handmade with care. I have also been busy making designs for Halloween, such as these Scullerflies, the steampunk Scullerflies, deadly spiders, a deadly spider damask, and this thirsty AF vampire design. If you want to be updated on sales and new design releases, be sure to either subscribe to my website's newsletter or join my Facebook group, Lovely Creations. Both my website and the Facebook group will be linked down below as well. Those are all the announcements I have for you, so with that out of the way, let's get started. For this project, I'm using a 15-ounce straight tumbler, which means that there is no taper from the top to the bottom. This is a stainless steel double-wall vacuum insulated tumbler, and I have fully prepped it first, which means I have sanded it, I have cleaned it, and I have spray painted it. You can use a primer only if you would like. That is what I've used here, just a white primer. However, you can also use a white spray paint with a built-in primer, or a primer and then just a regular spray paint, as long as you're using a primer first to give you proper adhesion between your paint and your sanded tumbler. I do purchase my tumblers direct from manufacturer. However, if you're looking for a Canadian tumbler supplier, I always recommend DAT Merchandise or DAHT Merchandise. They have great quality products as well as excellent customer service. She has also just released an app where you can purchase your tumblers through your phone, so that's very convenient as well. She also does carry this shape and style. However, she has it listed as a skinny tumbler, the 15-ounce skinny tumbler, but it is in fact a straight shape, so it doesn't have that taper either. You can do this on any kind of shape or size that you would like, but for purposes of this video, I am just doing it on a 15-ounce. So the first thing that I want to do before I get decorating it is I want to measure for size for my decal, and the reason for that is because the zipper split is going to be a big part of the design of this tumbler, so I want to make sure that I'm sizing it correctly. So I'm going to be taking a fabric tape measure because they are flexible, so they allow me to get more accurate measurements, and I'm just going to put it on my tumbler and kind of decide what size I'm looking for, and I think that 3 1/4 inches looks good, so I'm going to be measuring my design at 3 1/4 inches for printing, and I'm just going to show you right now on my computer how I sort of manipulate and change the background masking so it will fit my design size. For this part of the tutorial, I'm just going to be showing you using Adobe Illustrator, but you can use this with any of your design software, including Cricut Design Space or Silhouette Studio. I'm only choosing to show you on Illustrator because I don't have to zoom in a lot on my screen to show you guys basically the steps that I'm going to be taking for resizing. So this here is the vodka part of the label that we're going to be doing. So I'm just going to resize the width of this. You want to make sure you're resizing the width, and we had measured that at a 3 1/4, so I'm just going to put that to 3.25 inches and scale that down. Now, usually when I would do a zipper split, I would use just a standard V type shape, but as you can see with a V shape, it would end up cutting off the ends of my design, and it just doesn't really look as nice. So I got a little bit more creative with my shape, and I decided to go for an irregular pentagon instead. So this is the shape that I ended up going with. The reason why I chose this shape, one, was because it did fit my design nicely, but also because it's an easy shape for the zipper to follow. So what you would do now on this part here is you would just take your pentagon, and you can resize it to whatever size you want to have that would fit your cup. You can bring it down like so, you can bring it like so, you can bring it in on the sides, but one of the things that you want to make sure that you're going to be doing is that you're going to be leaving enough space between the outer side of your mask that you're going to be putting here, so this is going to be that part that we mask off, is going to have enough space between your edge of your decal and the edge of this, because a zipper is going to be going here, so you're not going to want to cover that. So I'm just going to, the original size I started off with was perfect, so I'm just going to show you guys that's basically the shape and how you would resize this if you need to resize for your project. Just to mention really quickly, you can use the print and cut feature on your cutting machines if you would like. However, keep in mind that they do require registration marks, which act as a bounding box. So it limits how much of the paper that you can use. So I believe with Cricut Design Space, it limits you to your paper size as being something like 9 1/4 and 6 3/4 inches rather than the 8.5 by 11 inches. So you're not going to get as much bang for your buck when you're using your specialty papers like your water slides or your tattoo papers, and they are rather pricey. I also want to mention that I do like to print my designs before I print them on the quality paper, so I just will do like a test print just to make sure that the size is in fact what I want for my cup, and also to make sure that I don't need to change my print settings to anything like a higher resolution on the print setting or anything like that. I cut the vinyl using 631, which is the temporary Oracal vinyl, just because it's easier to remove as a mask because we're not keeping this on permanently. And I also used a medium cardstock setting, so that way it cut through the backing paper as well. And the reason why I did this is because it's going to be easier to line up to my rim when I don't have an uneven edge or anything here. So this is the perfect cut line, so I can see exactly where this is going to be masking off the area for my label where my zipper is going to go. One of the things I do want to mention, if you're going to be doing this on a tumbler like the wine tumbler or something, when you're measuring this, you're going to have a bit of an angle and a curve. So what I like to do is I like to bring it up just a little bit higher. This does a couple things. First of all, it does make sure that I'm going to be even on both sides and this is going to be straight, but also it makes sure that I'm going to have enough space here for my zipper pull. So what I mean by that is right here, this zipper pull, you don't want to have this hanging below the bottom, because then you're going to have a wobbly bottom because this gets epoxy down, so that can be very awkward. So what I'm going to do is the same way that I always apply my decals is I'm going to start off by cutting my backing paper in half. So I'm just going to take some scissors, oops, and slice that down. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to line it up on my rim. And now I'm just going to hold from one side, starting from the center. I'm just going to push it out. And then I'll do the other side. By doing it with a mask instead of taping off on your own, it's going to do a couple things. First of all, you're going to be guaranteed you're going to have straight, even lines on both sides. And the other thing is that you're going to have consistent results across all of your tumblers. So if I always use the same dimensions for the mask, then I know for a fact that I'm always going to have tumblers that are going to look the same in a line. See that? Okay, so now that I've got this part here masked off, I'll be able to go ahead and move on to the marbling step. My tumblers are just hanging out on the turner with the vinyl masks we just put on them. They're ready for me to put some epoxy on them to do the marbling section. However, while my epoxy is mixing, I just wanted to show you guys what colors I'm going to be using for the marble, so then that way I can kind of streamline this process and make it a little bit easier for me, because you do want to act quickly once you've got your epoxy mixed. So the colors that I'm going to be using are going to be Armor Art Epoxy Neon Pigment in yellow. I'm also going to be using Armor Art Epoxy Pigment in white. I'll be using Armor Art Epoxy Metallic Silver. So those are the Armor Art mixes I'm going to be putting in. I'm also going to be using a couple of glitters. This is a bright yellow, fine or extra fine. I think this is fine glitter from Cat Glitter Factory. Actually, no, it looks more like extra fine. It doesn't have a name as of yet, so once that's named, I will link the name on there, but you can use any bright color that you think would go with something like this. And I've got Pink Before You Leap, which is another newer pink from Cat Glitter Factory. I'm also going to be using a little bit of Lexus in the 60 cut mix. So this is sort of the medium. It's not too fine, not too chunky. And I'm mixing up, this is, I believe this is the pink chameleon pigment powder from Cat, but it could also be the rose. I'm not 100% sure. And I mixed this one pretty well equal parts with some Rosebud Motel Eco Glitter as well. So once my epoxy is done mixing, I'm going to be bringing you guys over to my tumblers, and I'm going to start off by putting a thin coat of epoxy on those tumblers, and then I will be adding the leftover epoxy, splitting it between these cups here, and I'm going to show you how I marble it from there. But just to streamline it, like I said, I wanted to show you the colors first. Okay, so I have my epoxy mixed up. You know it's fully mixed when it doesn't look cloudy anymore. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to be adding a thin coat of the epoxy. So I'm not adding it as thin as you would if you were using it as like a glitter adhesive, but I'm not putting it on quite as thick as I would a regular coat of epoxy either, because I don't want my colorants to really run too much. I want them to marble a little bit. I do want there to be some shift, but I don't want them to run all over the place. Also, I am going up to the edge, just a little bit over the edge of that decal, but I'm not epoxying completely over the decal either, just because it's not necessary, because we're going to be peeling that decal back once our epoxy has set up just enough that the colors won't really run into that area anymore. So I'm going to be doing this. I have 3 tumblers that I'm doing right now. So I'm just going to keep going around the tumbler, adding, like I mentioned, that thin coat. And once that's done, I will torch it to remove any bubbles, and I'll let it keep turning while I add the epoxy to my colorants, so that way the epoxy gets a chance to level out a little bit. So just to show you, I have here the white epoxy pigment, and I've just got some epoxy in it. This is going to have the most epoxy in it because I'm going to use more white than any other color. But when I mix my pigments and my colorants, what I do is I start with the lightest color, so in this case obviously white, and I work my way over to the darkest. And I do that because in case I don't fully clean off all the color in between colors as I'm mixing them, I then have I'm not mixing, like accidentally putting like black or something in with the white. It's not a big deal if I have a tiny amount of white in with a darker color, but it's a bigger deal if you have a darker color in with a lighter. So I just mix it up as much as I can until I feel that it's fully mixed, and then I will scrape off the excess epoxy, put it down, and I'll just take a paper towel or a lint-free cloth, which is probably better, and I just wipe it off between, and I work my way through all of my colors like so. One other thing I did that I didn't mention is I took the chunky counterparts of the 2 glitters that I have, which was the fluorescent yellow and the pink Before You Leap. So I took their chunky mixed counterparts and I just mixed a couple, the 2 of them together into a little dish, and I'm going to be adding this last. So when I do this, I kind of work backwards. So I mix the white first. In this case, I'm going to be using my colors first. So I'm going to be starting with my darker color, which is going to be the darker pink color. And I'm just going to take a small amount. Really, honestly, a small amount does go a long way. And I'm just going to start adding it sort of here and there on the tumbler. And I always mix way more than what I need. I would rather have too much than not enough. And especially with these colors, because it's going to be a mostly white tumbler, a little bit of the color tint is going to really go a long way with it. It's going to stretch it out quite nicely. You don't want to overwhelm it with color, or else you're going to kind of muddy up your colors, and that's not going to look great. But right now, no real rhyme or reason. I'm just putting it on the tumbler wherever I kind of feel like putting it. And I am doing 3 tumblers at once, so I'm going to be doing the other one, so I'll kind of just sort of fast forward when I get to that section there. Once I'm done with a color, I'll put it aside, and I just take a piece of paper towel again, and I'm just going to wipe that color off of my gloves, just so I'm not tainting or contaminating the other colors that I have coming up. Once I'm done with that pink, I'm going to move on to the neon yellow, and this was the epoxy dye. And I'm just going to do the same kind of thing, just sort of hit the tumbler a few places. Sometimes I'll be closer to the bottom, sometimes I'll be right in the middle. You can use a tool for this too. I personally find that the finger works fine. I do use tools a little bit later on when I want to have finer lines. And if you find you have too much, you can always just wipe away. And also don't forget to do your bottoms. My next color is going to be the silver. Okay, and now I'm going to move into a little bit of Lexus, and this is just going to give some really nice sparkle to certain areas of the tumbler, and I'm basically just filling in wherever I have gaps. So right now it doesn't look like too much. The magic's going to happen when it starts to sort of blend. So don't stress out too much at this stage in the tumbler. And you'll kind of play with your own technique and find what works for you, what you like and what you don't. That's exactly how you make something your own. Some things I'm going to do are not going to work for you, or you're not going to like them, and you're going to want to change it up, and that is totally okay. Okay, at this point I want to move in, before I add my glitters, I want to move into my white, and this is where I'm going to start to blend these colors a little bit more. So I'm going to take my gloved finger, dip it into the white, and I start to swirl it on, and I'm kind of going around the colors that I already have in there and picking up the edges of the colors and swirling them in too, to kind of give it a little bit more of that marbly effect. And because this white is a brighter white than my paint underneath, you're going to be getting sort of this two-toned white effect as well, which is also quite nice in your marble. So now that I have this turning and all the whites on and all the colorants are on minus the glitter, I'm going to start adding my glitter. But to do that, I don't want to be using my fingertips because I find my fingertips are too thick for that. So I'm going to be using this little silicone tool here, which has this pointed tip. It's a silicone dotting tool. I will link it. I got this from Amazon. And at this point, I'm just going to be taking my glitter colors that are mixed into the epoxy and just putting some onto the tip here and just giving a little bit of extra glittery veining. And I'm just looking for areas that are maybe a little bit more bland than others, or where I just think that the color will kind of pop there a little bit. As I'm applying it, I'm also rolling my tool back and forth. So it's kind of picking up color, dropping color, giving it just a little bit more of a detail in that coloring. And you can also drag and pull other colors through on your marble too to add to that veining detail. So now that I have all of my colors on, I want to look at it with a bit more of a critical eye. And I kind of want to see if there's anywhere where there's gaps, or where I want to maybe add some other more prominent colors and veining. My glitter is getting pretty thick, so that means that the working time on my epoxy is pretty well up. The glitters will thicken up the first because they have the more texture in there than what the dyes have. So I am actually happy with how this is looking so far, but I think I'm going to add just a little bit more of the gray veining. I didn't want to use a black because I felt that it would be a bit too stark on the contrast, but definitely if that's something you want to try, give it a go. I'm just going to add a slight bit more of the gray veining throughout in some areas. But mostly I'm happy with this. And if you find there's a part where the colors mix maybe a little bit too much when you're putting that white in and got a little bit too muddy, you can always go back in and wipe some of that down and add some more coloring on there. These are pretty forgiving and pretty flexible as well. That's one of the reasons why I like to mix up more than what I need in case I make a mistake. It's a lot easier than having to waste time remixing your colorants, because honestly, by the time you've done that, you probably don't have much working time on your original colors on here anymore, and then you're in trouble. So that's what I like to do and why I do it. And I'm thinking that this looks pretty good. I might add just a little bit more of the darker pink as well. And again, I'm just rolling my tool, and my tool is picking up some of the other colors as well, so it will blend in with them while you're doing that too. Okay, so now that I have all of my colors on the tumbler and I am happy with how the marble is turning out, I'm going to hit it really quickly with a torch. I don't want to give too much heat to it because I don't want it to run too much, but I do want to make sure I'm not getting any bubbles in what I have on there. And also a little bit of running will help it blend just a little bit, but again, not too much. So I'm just going to take my chunky mix, 2 mixes that I mixed together to make my own mix. I didn't exactly worry about ratios. I just kind of eyeballed it until I liked what I saw, so I can't really give you the ratios that I use. But now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take some between my fingers and I'm just going to pinch some on here and there where I feel like a little bit of extra detail will make the design pop a bit more. And again, there's no real rhyme or reason to this. It's personal preference, and you can skip this step if you want, if you just like the look of the marble. You can add more, you can add less. It's totally up to you. But I like to start small and build it up, so if I want to add more later, that's always an option, but at this point it's kind of hard to take the color away. So do be careful with how much you're putting on. Just use small amounts and your fingers at a time. Now the absolute last thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to remove the mask that we have here for the zippered off area where we're going to be putting a different kind of glitter on it that is not marbled. So that was the vinyl that we placed earlier. Right now my glitter, sorry, my epoxy is pretty set up, so I'm not too worried about it running into the space that I've taped off here. So I'm actually ready at this point to peel back my vinyl mask. However, if you're only doing one and you worked faster than me, then you might still have it to be a little bit more runny than what you want, especially if you've just torched it. So you want to maybe set a timer for 10 or 15 minutes just to allow it to set up, so it's not going to be running into here, because the glitter that I'm going to be choosing is an iridescent glitter. So if I have anything other than white underneath here, it's going to show. So I want to be careful that I'm not having too much running in there. I can always respray paint it white, but if I can save myself that step, that's always desirable. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a pair of tweezers. I use tweezers for weeding, so these are just some sharp tip tweezers that I have, and I'm going to just take them and kind of lift up on the corner. Now you're going to notice that I'm wearing gloves because at some point I am going to switch over to using my hands, and there is epoxy on this and you do want to protect yourself. And I want to be careful that I'm not accidentally touching, now that I have the epoxy on my hands, that I'm not accidentally touching the area that I had taped off. And there it is. If you did accidentally get some onto the edge of it, or you accidentally touched it, what you can do is you can use a Q-tip and some rubbing alcohol and it will take it off. But in this case I was lucky and I don't have to do that repair, so I don't have to show it to you. So that's it for now. Once this has fully dried, I will show you how I tape off the other area and how I add my glitter. The tumbler is fully dry. It's had its chance to marble. All I've done is I've just pulled it off the turner. I haven't sealed it or done anything else to it, so this is just the fresh marble from yesterday, but it is now completely hard. So our next step is going to be to tape off this center section here where we're going to be putting our vodka decal. So I'm going to be using painter's tape for this. I prefer frog tape. You can use either the yellow or the green. If you still have things that are a little bit more delicate, like more recently cured, I would definitely recommend using the yellow, which is meant for delicate. The green is really good too though. So because we have this different kind of shape on the bottom, I can't just do a V. So I'm just going to pull off some 4 small pieces and just line it up with what we had before. So when you apply your tape, you want to make sure that you don't have any puckering or anything like that on here, because that would mean that the epoxy would get underneath, and you just want to try to avoid that to get cleaner lines. But I've just followed that line. It's ready to go now. I have 2 others I'm going to do, and then I will come back and show you the glitter application. The glitter color I'm going to be using is Precious Opal from Em & Cat. I'm not sure if it's on the site yet, but if it is, I will link it. If not, I'll link it as soon as it's available. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be using the epoxy method to apply my my adhesive, to apply my glitter. So I'm just going to be using epoxy as the adhesive, which means you only use a very, very thin amount of the epoxy. So before I put my parchment paper underneath my tumbler, I'm just going to start by putting the epoxy on. If you do warm this up, it does help the epoxy to spread thinly and evenly over this. However, because I'm going to be doing 3 of them, I don't want them cooling between, and once I've got epoxy in my gloves, I don't want to be handling my heat gun, so I'm not going to be heating it up today, but that is always an option. You can also use Mod Podge or any other adhesive that you like. Another nice effect for this would be if you used Tack It and then you burnished the glitter on, especially because we're using an opal, and opal does have a really nice shift when you're doing the burnishing technique. So one of the things to just keep in mind is that there is going to be a little bit of forgiveness around your zipper area, because the zipper will be there to help to help hide any potential mistakes or blemishes that you might have right at your seam where the 2 different techniques meet. So that's also kind of nice to know. So I'm just going to put that super fine layer on. And once I know I've got it on there, I don't have any gaps, I am good to go. So I'm just going to do this for my other 2 tumblers as well, and then I will start putting the glitter on. Alright, so I am now ready to add the glitter, so I'm just going to sprinkle this on. When you're using the epoxy method, one of the things you want to watch for is right after you have applied your glitter, wait a few minutes, take a look at your tumbler again. If you notice anything that looks like a wet spot or a slick spot, all that means is that in that particular section the epoxy was too thick, and it's just sort of soaked in all of your glitter. So all you have to do, is a very, very simple fix, is just go in and sprinkle some more glitter on top of it. The reason why I prefer the epoxy method over other methods is because I do find I can usually get away with just 1 coat of glitter, so I do use less glitter when I'm using the epoxy method to adhere my glitter to the tumbler. So that's it. It is now glittered. So I am immediately going to remove my tape. You absolutely do not want to forget this step. If you have accidentally forgotten this, it'll be a pain in the butt to get the tape off. You can do it, but you'll probably require the assistance of an X-Acto knife to cut your seam and remove the tape that way. So that's it now. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to let it dry, and then I will show you guys next steps. Once the epoxy has completely dried, your next step is going to be just to lightly brush off any of the excess glitter. I like to do it over top of a parchment a sheet of parchment paper, so then that way I can collect this and put it back in my bottle and just save that glitter, so I'm not wasting so much. And you're just doing this to make sure that you don't have too much glitter shifting, and also to make sure that your that the base is fully glittered. So sometimes you might get a streak or something, or a hole where you didn't see it with the epoxy, and then you'd have to do a second coat. But like I said, I find that when I do this with epoxy method, I'm less likely to have that happen. So when I do Mod Podge, I usually have to use more than 1 coat. With the epoxy method, that's pretty rare. So I'm just using a fan brush to do this, but you can use really any brush. You're not looking to put too much pressure on, just lightly brush off the excess. After I have brushed off the excess glitter, I'm going to put on a coat of Quick Coat, which is just a brush-on sealer. You can use a spray sealer as well. You can also use a coat of polyacrylic, like Minwax polyacrylic as well. I find that the polyacrylic is a little bit thinner than this is, and I usually have to use more than 1 coat, whereas with the Quick Coat, I'm only having to use 1 coat per tumbler. But the reason why I'm doing this is because I want to make sure, 1, that I'm sealing my glitter into place, 2, that I am also providing a barrier for any contaminants that maybe have gotten onto the cup that might repel the epoxy. So for example, chunky glitter often does repel epoxy, so by putting on a coat of the Quick Coat, you are helping to prevent that from happening. And also, as you've noticed, I have been handling it with my hands, so there's a possibility that some of the oils from my hands have transferred onto here and might start repelling the epoxy as well. That being said, I always do wash my hands right before I handle the tumbler, so then that way there's minimal oils on my hands too. So I'm just going to use a Taklon brush. I get them off of Amazon. I like to use the Taklon brushes because they do help provide a nice even coat of the sealer, and it does reduce any brush strokes that you have. But even if you do see some brush strokes, it's not a big deal. Your epoxy will clear those up for you. You won't notice them once you have epoxied. So I usually do the marble part first and then just save the glitter part for last. It's not a huge deal though if you do it all at once. It's just kind of habit for me. And once I have the quick coat on, I will just pop it on my turner right away and just let it turn for about 5 minutes. And then that way, if there's any that I have too much on here, it'll just, rather than dripping off of it, excuse me, rather than dripping off of it, it will just kind of turn and even itself out just like the epoxy would. Once I have my quick coat on here and it's fully dry, my next step is going to be to epoxy these until they are smooth. The tumbler is now fully smooth from the epoxy, so my next step is going to be to start adding the water slide decal. So the first thing I want to do is I want to take my lid and I want to line my lid up here with the point of the masked off area, this glittered section here, so then that way I've got a straight line here, and this makes the center point here. And then also on the back I can line up my back decal, the center of the back decal, with the line that goes down the center part of this lid here as well. I explained this in other videos that I have as well, so if you've seen me do these before, you know that I use my lid to help section my tumblers. So that's going to be my first thing. Now, just so you know, I have not sanded this tumbler. The reason why I did not sand it is because you don't want to have little scratch marks in behind your clear water slide decals. So the next thing I'm going to be doing is I'm actually going to need to be cutting my decals out. So I just printed this using, I used Photoshop, but you can use something like Google Docs or what have you in order to put out as many images onto one sheet as you can, so then that way you're not wasting your paper like you would with the print and cut feature, since we are doing this on a clear water slide background. Because if you're using something like print then cut, I know for the very least when it comes to the Cricut, it really reduces the amount of paper real estate that you can use because of those registration marks. So I just like to do it this way and then hand cut them. But I do cut as close to around the design as I possibly can to try to avoid any edges that you might see. So the water slide paper that I'm using is that from Newfound Finishes. It is absolutely incredible paper. I used to hate water slide. I always went with tattoo paper instead, but I find that this stuff is really, really great. It is very, very durable, very, very easy to work with. So I highly, highly recommend it. She does sell the blank sheets as well as already printed water slide. So if that's something that you're interested in trying out, I definitely recommend checking out her page and her site. I will be linking Newfound Finishes on this in the description section of this video as well. So I've just kind of cut it out pretty good, and now I'm just going to kind of go in and get it a little bit closer. Okay, so there it is cut out. So now I'm going to be putting it into the water. I usually go with the printed side down first. I'm using the laser, I have a laser printer, so I'm using the laser paper. Make sure that if you're buying blank water slide paper, no matter who you're buying it from, you're buying the right type of paper for your printer. So if you have an inkjet printer, buy inkjet paper. If you have a laser printer, buy the laser paper. The nice thing about the laser is you do not have to spray seal it after you have printed it, because it is not like a ink that's going to run when you dip it in the water. The laser applies the image differently from an inkjet, and that's why that happens. So once I see it kind of lifting from my paper, I know that it's ready to put on my tumbler. So I'm going to start by putting a little bit of water onto my tumbler, and I want to make these look sort of uniform from the last ones I did. So what I'm going to do really quickly, I like to measure a lot, is I'm just going to pick 2 points on my tumbler and measure the distance that I had on my original design. So that way I'm kind of doing it the same. Okay. And what I'm going to do now is, if I didn't have a center mark on the design that's easily identifiable, I would have folded my image in half first. So I'm going to show you that on the next design that I do, but instead I'm lining up the bottom part, this little bottom part of the design right here, with the center of the V bottom on the glittered section. So once I've measured on both sides and I know that this is about the same height as this, I have centered this. I see that it is within my design because we'd measured all of that out on the computer first. I just want to take my thumb and kind of keep it in place while lightly just kind of taking, my finger's wet from the water, just sort of taking it and smoothing it over to make sure that I don't have any bubbles underneath here. I usually start with my finger first and then I move on to other tools that I may want to use. So for instance, these silicone brushes are good ones for making sure we don't have water trapped underneath. And again, I like to keep my thumb on the design at first because when you first put them on and they have the water underneath them, they slide around really easily and you don't want to have spent your time measuring and putting it on carefully and then just to accidentally knock it out of place while you're trying to make sure that there's no bubbles or no wrinkles and that it is nice and smooth on your tumbler. So it looks good, there's no bubbles, there's no water underneath, there's no wrinkles, so I'm just going to take a piece of paper towel and I'm just going to, again, lightly go over the design and just dry off that tumbler and that area. Now before I put the water slide on the back, I want to let this side here have a chance to dry so that way I get a better grip on here because I don't want to flip this over, put it on my desk or on my pool noodles to help prevent it from rolling around and then have it accidentally lift my back design. So I'm going to let this dry while I go ahead and put water slide decals on the remaining tumblers that I have as well. This side is dry now, and just so you can see, even before I've got epoxy on it, you don't really at all see the line of where the water slide is on here, and this is because, like I said, we didn't sand it, so we didn't scuff up the surface, and when I cut it as close to the design as I possibly could. So it does help to eliminate any lines that you might see. And once I've epoxied this, if there is anything that's different between the two, you won't see it at all anymore. So I'm just going to flip this over now, and I'm going to use the center line here on the midpoint of my lid again to line up with this decal. Now in this case, this design doesn't have a center point that is easily identifiable. So what I do is I fold my design in half and I actually hold it up to a little bit of light so that way I can make sure that the end points of my design are touching. So I'm just gonna do that quickly. And once I have it, I am just going to squeeze right here at the very top part. And this here is, give or take, the center part of the design itself. So I now have that for reference. What I'm going to do now is the same thing as what I did before. I've already measured my other tumbler to check for height. I'm just going to add a little bit of water onto the epoxied tumbler now to make it a little bit easier. Again, I put this in. Now my water is only, it's not cold, it's not hot, it's just warm water. Probably about room temperature, and like I said, I like to put the design face down first because it does help to prevent it from rolling, and then once I've got it totally saturated, I can flip it at that point to kind of check to see if it starts lifting on the sides, because if it starts lifting on the sides, then I know it's ready to peel away from the backing paper. Also, I did want to mention, so as I mentioned already, Newfound Finishes does have paper blanks, like water slide blanks. They also do have a printing license for my designs. Right now there are 3 companies that have a printing license for my design, which basically means if you do see these companies popping up with my designs to sell for water slide or sublimation or tattoo transfers or anything like that, as long as they're being printed and not sold as digital designs, then they do have the licenses for that. But I do appreciate when people message me just to make sure that I have the people that have are selling the designs on water slide are legit. I really do appreciate that because digital theft is a big issue. So thank you so much to everyone who does look out for me. Just so you know, Newfound Finishes, Samalam, West Coast Vinyl, both have printing licenses, as well as one other, which I cannot remember right now. She's in the States. She just purchased one, so she has it too. So thank you to everyone who has followed the rules and the licensing requirements and purchasing that license. The back design is on now. I'm going to do the same thing as I did on the front, and I'm going to let this dry. I'm actually going to let both of them dry, and I'm going to let them dry for a little bit over an hour before I do my next step, just to make sure that they really are completely adhered to this tumbler and they're not just going to come off again if I introduce water, or if I you know, put my hand over top of it. It's not going to slide or shift or go out of place anymore. All the water slides are on my tumblers now, so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to start prepping my zippers for application. And I'm just going to do this while I'm waiting for these to dry so I can kind of get some more things done as quickly as possible. So I'm using a donut pull zipper. It's my favorite style. I just like the look of it, but any zipper that you like is fine. You are going to be trimming off the majority of the fabric on these. However, whenever I do a light colored cup, I do like to use a white base fabric, and I use a black base fabric zipper for my darker cups. So that's like this here. I usually prefer the silver, but you can get like antique bronze, or you can get gold. You can get any color that you like. I just find that silver usually goes with pretty much everything I do. So I usually keep a white base silver zipper pull stash and a black base silver zipper pull stash on hand at all times. This is a 10-inch. My black ones are a 9-inch. I like to get them a little bit longer, so then that way I can just cut them down to size and I can use them on any size tumbler that I have. It's just easier for me. So I did get these off of Etsy. I will post the link where I got mine. But just to mention that Jamie Villeneuve of Fabric Tumblers Canada has also brought in a lot of really cool zippers, including this one with these zipper pulls, the donut one. She does only have the black base at this time. I'm not sure if she will be bringing in the white base as well, but she is getting these in too, which is really, really cool. And she has some other super cool zippers too. So the first thing that I'm going to be doing is I'm going to need to cut away the excess material around the side of the zipper. So I'm just going to take a pair of scissors, and I am going to start on one side, just cutting as close to the zipper as I possibly can. So I'm going to use these two fingers to sort of pull this tight, and be careful not to snip your fingers. I'm also kind of cutting on a bit of an angle towards the zipper itself, just to try to get as tight in there as I possibly can. And once I get pretty high up on the zipper, I'm just going to take it and I'm going to pull it back downwards. And with it separated like this, I am going to repeat this process. So now I'm just going to kind of hold it from below, still trying to keep it tight. I'm not as concerned with this section though, because I am going to be trimming away some of the top parts of the zipper, but I do want to have it so that it is ready in case it is, in case I need more length of zipper than what I'm anticipating. Okay, and now I'm just going to repeat that process, but on the other side of the zipper. Once I'm done clipping off the majority of it, what I'm going to do next is I'm just going to go back through, and if I see an area where I didn't get quite as close to the zipper as I did on other sections, I'm just going to trim that down a little bit. Now that I have this done, my next step is going to be, I'm just going to take my fingers and I'm going to start scraping down the edge of the zipper and pulling up, pinching and pulling away, and that's going to help me get some of the extra cloth that's on the sides here and just pull that down. Usually it's not as fuzzy as this. These are different zippers I'm working with. I used to use the YKK, but I've had a hard time getting them in Canada. So I'm going to want to make sure that I've totally defuzzed this, because it will not go well with the epoxy. If the epoxy gets on, right now it's maybe just a loose, fluffy fuzzy, but if you have epoxy dry on that, it can become a sharp, bumpy issue for you later. So try to defluff that as much as possible if your zipper is fluffing off the way that mine did too. So that's my zipper prepped and ready to go. It's been mostly defuzzed. If I have a couple stragglers that I see, I will try to pull them off. If I can't pull them off, I'll just take my zipper, my scissors, and cut as close to the zipper as I possibly can. But you can see here, as I mentioned, that even though I've cut away the majority of the fabric, there is still some just like a little bit in behind that zipper, which is why I try to at least match a light zipper to a light cup and a dark zipper to a dark cup. With these new zippers, I was having a bit of a harder time getting this little bottom piece of fluff here, because I like to kind of keep it as tight to the bottom as possible, and I just wasn't able to get that off. So what I tried, and it actually worked really, really well just now, is I took a pair of nail clippers and I just kind of clipped right at the bottom. and it definitely gave me a much tighter, cleaner finish right here at the base of the zipper. So I'm not sure if you can see that difference, but all those fuzzies that were on the end are now off. And let me see if I have for comparison. So you can see here, this one still has all those fuzzies.
Give me one right now.
Okay, honey, remember I'm recording?
Oh,
Thank you, sweetheart. Love you.
thank you, Mama.
So if you remember, I did not sand this tumbler before I put my decals on, and the reason for that was so I didn't have any tiny scratch marks, and so this would blend better once I added the epoxy to the tumbler. That being said, I don't love the idea of just putting epoxy straight on a tumbler that has not yet been sanded, because the sanding adds a little bit of grit to the next coat of epoxy. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a piece of sandpaper. This is 220 grit, and I've wet it, so I'm just doing a little bit of a wet sand, and I'm just going to come in around the decals. I'm not going to go over my water slide. I don't want to accidentally damage it. And just very lightly, I am going to scuff up that surface. And this is going to, like I said, just give a little bit of grit to my next coat of epoxy, just to make it a little bit more secure. Once I'm done sanding this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it over and I'm just going to clean this off with some Dawn dish soap and some water. I'm going to be very careful and gentle on my decals, but this is why I waited the extra time for these to fully dry. Just waited a couple of hours to make sure that I can wash this and I don't have to worry about it peeling up my water slide. But that being said, please still be very careful around your water slides. Don't be doing too much scrubbing there. Once I have done a full wash on this, I will also dry it off with a microfiber cloth to try to help absorb and get rid of any of the dust that might be left behind. Now these have been washed and dusted, I'm going to start looking at the zipper application steps. So I'm going to be starting off by taking my zipper and kind of figuring out how high I need to have my pull. So I'm just going to kind of set it up. I want to make sure that this is not dipping down below the bottom rim, because that will make for a wobbly bottom of your tumbler. And I'm going to start pulling back on the pull itself just to kind of get my height. And something like that looks good. So now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to be using E6000 glue to glue my zippers on. I've used the liquid fusion as well, which is used for rhinestones. That works too. I kind of like it because it's in this bottle, but I find it takes longer for it to dry between steps. And because we need the glue to set up a little bit before moving on to next steps or other sides, so it stays in position, I like to use the E6000. So all I do is I just take a popsicle stick and the E6000 and I just kind of rub it onto the back of my zipper. You really want to make sure you're getting it on the ends very well. Perfect. Now I'm just going to carefully place it where I want it to go. I'm going to try to get it nice and straight. And that looks good. And the last thing I'm going to do while I wait for this to set up is I'm just going to take a tiny bit more of the glue, and I'm going to take just a little bit and put it right there on the bottom part of the zipper pull, and then I'm just going to press it there so I'm gluing my pull down to the zipper itself. I might need, didn't have enough glue on that. You really should be wearing gloves. I forgot to put them on before I recorded. But this stuff is not great for your skin, so please do wear gloves. I'm gonna, as soon as I'm done this one, put a pair of gloves on. There we go. And then there we go. And I'm just going to let this sit and set up before I go ahead and start moving the other things, so that way I'm not shifting it out of place. So while I wait for this one to set up, I'm going to do my other tumblers. This side here is set up enough, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some more E6000. I'm going to start with one side. Hold on. If I can get it out of my tube. I want to make sure I get enough on my popsicle stick that I can run up the length that I need to. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to peel this back, and this is why I wanted this to set up, so I don't just peel it right off. So I'm just going to peel this back, go up the length of the zipper, kind of going back and forth, coating it with some of that glue. And then carefully, you're going to place it following the line of where you had that marked off. So your glitter line now. And I'm just pressing it carefully into place, making sure it's not puckering or buckling anywhere. And then I can move on and do that to the other side as well. Alright, so this guy's pretty good into place. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start measuring to look at where I need to cut off my zipper. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be taking my scissors and I'm going to be cutting between two of these metal teeth here. But I want to make sure that when I'm cutting it, I'm not bringing it right up to the rim. I want to make sure that there's going to be a little bit of a gap between the zipper and the rim to allow for a good seal with your epoxy. So I've just trimmed it. Now I'm double checking. And I was a little cautious, so I'm going to trim down one more piece. I would rather cut a little more cautiously and have to take a little bit extra off than cut too liberally and be regretting that choice after the fact. So now I'm ready to apply the glue to this side of the zipper. So same as before, just lifting it up from underneath, putting a stretch of the glue all the way along the length of the zipper and kind of cleaning up the sides as I go. Now if I have here a lot of glue, that's going to be okay. I can just kind of scrape that away. So just like that. So that is that side, and I'm going to repeat the process on the other side. The glue is completely dry, the zippers are secure, they are in their place, they're not going to be moving. So what I want to do now is I just want to go over and brush off any loose pieces of glue or anything that maybe got on the tumbler while I was working on it. You'll notice that I'm doing this just with my bare hands. I did wash my hands first so I don't have as much oil on my hands when I'm doing this. And also I'm going to be putting on, as soon as I'm done doing this, another coat of the quick coat. So this is good, it's all dusted off, there's nothing loose or stringy staying on the cup anymore from the glue or from that process. So now I'm going to take my quick coat, put a small amount into a dish again, my trusty Taklon brush, and just as before, I'm going to start to do a thin coat of this all over the tumbler. And this is again to make sure that I am sealing any potential contaminants. I'm offering a barrier between that. I'm sealing the water slide to make sure that that's going to be perfectly in place and not moving once the epoxy's on. I want to make sure that my zipper isn't going to be repelling any epoxy. So I'm just doing this light coat of the sealer once over, and then I can epoxy this until I have a good seal, a great seal over top of the zipper. I'm not worried about anything like the epoxy having any areas where water might get in, where the seal is a little bit weak or anything like that. And then when the rest of the cup is smooth, and that way you'll know. This is going to have some texture when I'm done epoxying it, but that's basically it. So this is the completed look before epoxy. I'm going to get this completely epoxied, and then I will do my final photo shoot, and that's the tumbler. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please support me by giving it a thumbs up. If you're new to my channel, please click my logo to subscribe and tickle that little notification bell so you're notified of future videos. You can also check out more of my videos by clicking on one of the thumbnails on the right, or by scrolling through my playlists. Thanks again for watching, and I'll be back for more Tumbler tips and tutorials.